Hi, everybody. This is the third time that I have spoken with Kevin, the non-traditional Catholic, the I should say, ex-traditional Catholic or non-traditional Catholic, however you want to think of it. He was born and raised a Catholic and in the very traditional aspect of Catholicism. And he somewhat recently, kind of recently, has determined that he's questioning the faith and he has become a moral anti-realist. And so today we're going to dig into what it means to be a moral anti-realist and how he decided that that seems like an appropriate path for him to take. And I'm going to fight back a little bit on that because I am a moral realist. And so let's go ahead and let me just first say what moral realism means. It means that we believe that we have an objective moral values and duties, and that's the moral values and duties to do what's right, to tell the truth, to be kind, to be sincere, to be righteous, all that kind of good stuff, to be just, to be fair. So we believe that if you believe you're a moral realist. And so I'm going to actually get to what Kevin believes, because maybe that's not exactly what he doesn't discount. So let's see what it is. So Kevin, what do you believe? Or tell us about yourself in case people don't know you. Shoot, I think Kevin has frozen up here. So while Kevin comes back, I want to say hi to people in the chat. Hi, Shiami, and hi, Slam RN. So I think Kevin might just be a little bit frozen right here. Oh, here he comes. I think he's coming back. He jumped out. So anyway, here's the bottom line. What we're going to talk about as soon as Kevin comes back, we're going to talk about what it is to believe if you have. Oh, there he is. He's back. Okay, Kevin, you want to tell us about your position?
I don't know. I do. Yeah. Sorry. My internet is normally pretty good, so I don't know if this is my end or your end or what. But if bear with me. So, I'm a moral anti-realist. In a word, that just means that I don't think that there's facts of the matter about morality. The reason I got there, more or less, is a direct result of my nominalism. So if you don't think that any universals exist, morality seems to be one of the universals. So if none of the universals exist, then neither does morality. It's just kind of like a logical consequence. And we could do the whole thing about like how I wound up as a moral realist. But I think I spoke a little bit about that last time I was on. So I'm happy to revisit like how I got here. But I think for now, I'm happy just to leave it at I am a moral realist. I don't think that there's facts of the matter about morality because I don't think that morality per se exists. So that's me. And SJ, if I can ask you a question. So obviously moral realism comes in like a whole bunch of different shapes and colors. I think that you are a proponent of divine command theory. Is that right?
Yes.
Cool. And do you want to just kind of like tell me what you mean by divine command theory and maybe for the audience as well?
I believe that God has created a moral system, and I believe that he has implanted within us a conscience to know the difference between right and wrong. And some people might say, well, wait a second, there are exceptions to this conscience. There are people who are known as psychopaths or sociopaths, and that's about 1% of the population is psychopath and 3% is sociopath. But I would push back on that with an academic study that I found that says that psychopaths know the difference between right and wrong. They just don't care. That's actually the title of the study that I found. And so there was a study of psychopaths, and they actually were able to discern what's right and wrong. And so I would say that we have objective moral values and duties. They were given to us by God. And the reason why we can know this is because when we do something that's wrong, most of us, unless we've somehow suppressed those moral values, most of us know within our conscience that we've done something wrong. And our conscience kind of nags at us like little Jiminy Cricket, JC, by the way, sitting on our shoulder. And so our conscience lets us know. And so that's what I would say. And I say that God has made this moral system. And under divine command theory, it basically says that he sort of commanded us to follow this particular system. And Jesus really emphasized what that meant. He said, love the Lord above all else and love your neighbors as yourselves. And so I think that those are commands from Jesus, commands from God, and the system's been set up by him. And he's even implanted the conscience within us to let us know that we have it, even if we say we're agnostic or atheist.
So that leads me to, if you don't mind, I'll ask you a couple questions about divine command theory. So my first question is going to be this. So you said that at least a decent part of why you're a moral realist is because you have these moral intuitions. So I'll just share a very brief story that I already recounted last time I was on, but I lacked the moral intuition that gay relationships were wrong. That was kind of the thing that like really kickstarted my deep dive into philosophy, particularly philosophy from a Catholic perspective, because the Catholic Church teaches that gay relationships are wrong. So why does the Catholic Church teach that gay relationships are wrong? Well, let me dive into that. So I did. But my lack of this intuition is precisely what kickstarted my deep dive into philosophy like 5 years ago. What would you say to somebody like me? And this appears to be a rather common lack of intuition. It's an overwhelming amount of like young people today are in favor of the legality of gay relationships. And that to me speaks to the fact that this intuition that gay relationships are immoral just isn't an intuition that is as widespread as some people might think it is. So what do you think about that?
So, yeah, and I want to say the idea that you're looking at intuitions in the first place is really good, because in the whole theorizing of moral realism, a lot of the people who write about that talk a lot about our intuitions and our reasoning, and they put those two together. And so first I want to talk about that, and then I'll get into the specific issue with people who are gay. But the idea that people say, even people who are atheists like Jonathan Haidt, he talks a lot about our moral intuitions and our moral reasoning and how we take those two together. It speaks to human exceptionalism, because we have these two intuitions and reasoning that can be dissimilar from what other life forms on the world have. But the idea is, in this is that we have the intuitions, we have the reasoning, but we also have a conscience. That's Christian synderesis, and that takes these two, puts them together, and says that we also not only have the intuitions, but we also have intuitions that are kind of strange. Like, for example, if we see a young child about to be jumping into a pond and an alligator jumps out to grab that young child, our intuitions are to run away and save ourselves, but our conscience tells us go save that kid, even though we're risking our own lives. And so I don't think our intuitions are can fully explain our morality and our moral guidepost. But I also, with respect to people who are gay, the perceptions of that have changed over the centuries in quite a bit in recent times. So for centuries and centuries and centuries, populations basically pretty much discriminated against people who were choosing same-sex partners and doing that kind of stuff. And in recent times, we've seen, especially since like the 1980s, 1990s, our Western societies have changed in quite a way as far as how people view gay people. I have quite a few gay colleagues, gay friends, and I've actually had gay neighbors. In fact, I used to make a joke that I didn't live on a straight street in my other house down in Boca Raton, because there were gay guys right next door to me and gay guys right across the street. And so we used to make a little joke, and we'd go to their parties and stuff like that. And so really nice people. I just can say, though, if we want to say, what does God say about that? It's pretty clear in the Bible, especially in First Corinthians and in Romans, as far as the New Testament, and then Jesus talking about a man and a woman being how he designed marital relations. He's supposed to be between one man and one woman, not two men and one woman, or 10 women and one man, or two men. He just basically said one man and one woman. And so he's pretty much set it straight. So if I want to follow the Bible and follow what Jesus said, I have to also follow those beliefs, that divine command from Jesus. So that's just what you have to do.
Yeah. So if you don't mind me going back to the intuition part, I thought, and you were breaking up a little bit for me. It might just be the internet on my end, but did you say something to the effect of not all moral truths are intuitive?
No, I didn't say
Okay.
that.
What, and this is where you were probably breaking up. So do you think that everything is, do you think that all moral truths are intuitive?
Do I think all moral truths are intuitive? So I would say that I think all moral truths. That's a good question, because some of it, I want to say that some of our beliefs are a function of the culture in which we're raised. And so
100%.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
so it's in it. So if I happen to be raised, say, in the Middle East or something like that, I probably would have started off as a Muslim before I
Mhm.
started investigating my faith. And being raised in the West, I started off as a Christian Catholic and ended up coming back to Catholicism. But I did go out and search and try to question whether or not what I was believing was true. But as a fun, but if I were also raised in, say, the 1500s in, or I'll actually let me get a better year. Say I'm raised in the 1700s in the United States. How would I have felt about slavery? I don't know. I don't know if I can't really say how I would felt because I'm not raised back then, so I don't know about that. But I do know that there's one value that I think everything stems from, and that's the value of human life and human dignity.
So we can do you want to stay on intuitions for a minute, or do you want to go towards like human life and human dignity? Because I
We
have
can go to
questions about both.
yeah, because human life and human dignity. I think if we just say that all humans, uh, I mean, humans have value. All humans have intrinsic value. I think you could probably agree to that.
So I actually don't agree that humans have intrinsic value. Because intrinsic would mean that, like, even if like there was only like let's say that there was only one human on earth, like there was no other humans, and that human was like born in a state of being in a coma and like never had any conscious thoughts. Intrinsic means that human still has value. I think that humans have extrinsic value, which means that I think that humans value each other and we value ourselves. But if there were no conscious minds, I don't think that humans would have value.
And that speaks to the value of the conscience mind before matter of God. So God has assigned us each value, and he said we're made in his image. We're God's image bearers. And so if you believe in God, then you would realize that we're all of value, even if we're born as in a vegetative state and we're in a coma. The idea that extrinsic value can be extremely dangerous because we saw how that played out under the Nazis, and we can see how it plays out today with abortion. And so you see that people, suddenly the baby inside the mother, who the mother decides not to name the baby, suddenly the baby doesn't have any value to some mothers. And so the mothers will go and terminate the pregnancy, they call it. And they don't even think of it as another human life form or something that has intrinsic value, regardless of what the mother's valuation of the baby is.
And for the record, I agree that like the model that I believe is dangerous. I just also happen to think it's true. So not everything that I say here is going to be like, yes, this is true, and I'm so happy that it's true. Like I hold a lot of beliefs that I wish were otherwise, but I think that it's true anyway. You know what I mean? So like, if there's a bomb coming and you might really wish that there was no bomb coming, but if you're like honestly searching for truth, you're like, no, look, the bomb, it's right there, it's coming. That's how I feel kind of. I'm like, no, I don't think that humans have intrinsic value. Gee whiz, it would sure be cool if we did, but I don't think we do.
I definitely think we do, but I just want to tell you something really. I think this might kind of amuse you. So on Saturday, I have this Bible. This is my Catholic Bible. I finally got 73 book Bible, and I flipped it open. I said a little prayer.
Mine's right there.
Yeah, I said a prayer Saturday, and I flipped it open, and it came up to the Magnificat, which is when the angel Gabriel announced Mother Mary's pregnancy. And that happened to be, and I had forgotten that it was the Feast of the Annunciation, because I just came back to Catholicism and I was a total clown. And all of a sudden it hits me later in the day. I thought, oh my gosh, it's the Feast of the Annunciation. I didn't even go to church. What's wrong with me? I feel terrible. And but then I realized, I thought, wait a second, when I flipped open the Bible, God told me it was the Feast of the Annunciation. And so today, before our conversation, I flipped this twice open. Would you want to know what it came to?
Yeah.
Okay, the first time I flipped it open, it came to this Corinthians passage about sexual immorality. And then the second time, it came to the parable of the lost sheep.
Is that me, the lost sheep?
That's you.
All right.
No, because I knew that you were going to talk about the reason you left the church had to do with sexual issues. It had to do with your take on gay marriage and that kind of thing. And so I think maybe that was why I flipped open to, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
It just seemed really coincidental and strange.
Yeah, just to add a little bit of clarity there, I didn't leave the church because I think that the church oh, it's true, but I don't like it, so I'm going to leave. I actually just don't think that morality is teleological. And it actually sounds like you agree with me that morality is not teleological. Because if you're a divine command theorist, then you probably don't think that morality is teleological. What makes something moral is whether or not God commands it, right? Not what the telos of the act is.
No. To my understanding of divine command theory, maybe I'm saying it in the wrong way. To my understanding of it, God himself is the source of all morality. It doesn't have to do with the Euthyphro dilemma. And so I'm not talking about something like God assigning moral commands or anything like that. I'm just saying he's the source of morality, and we're discovering morality as we travel through life, and you discover right and wrong and distinguish those kind of things according to how you're shaped. And so I think we have intrinsic value, and we also have these moral duties to do what's right and to do what's wrong.
Oh, so I need to ask you a couple questions, I think, because I almost heard like a little bit of like virtue ethics in there at the end. So maybe I can ask this clarifying question, and then your answer will tell me if I would call you a divine command theorist or not. So if God commanded somebody to, and just bear with me with this example, torture a puppy, would torturing a puppy for that person in that one instance be a moral thing to do if God commanded it?
See, I don't think God would command anybody to do that. So it's kind of like saying if God commanded a man to have sex with another man, would that be a moral action? And again, that would be going in counter to what God said was right to do in the Bible. And so the same thing with torturing a puppy.
I'm losing you, SJ.
Oh shoot, really? Are you guys in the chat? Can you guys?
Okay, you're back.
Shoot, sorry if I don't know if it's my connection or what. Or
it's right. Sorry, could you just start from the beginning again?
I don't think that God would command people to do things that are inconsistent with what.
That's a different question. But if he did, would it be moral? It's okay if he never would, but if he did, like theoretically, it's not metaphysically impossible for that to happen, right? If God can do all things, then God could command. So if he did, would that become moral?
If he commanded us to do X, then probably X in the first place is a moral action.
Yes.
Excuse me.
And I'm a nominal, like William of.
Shoot, now I'm losing you a little bit here too.
Nominalism. How do you like maintain some kind of morality? William of Ockham is like a.
Oh shoot.
Man theorist.
So
he's a big fan. Like he bites the bullet, so to speak. So he says, if God commanded you to like, person is,
yeah, I'm losing you just a little bit, but I think we'll probably come back in just a second. So
I almost wonder if I can just join from like, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, no
sorry.
worries. So, well, I think that the idea.
I'm gonna just see if I can join from my phone.
Okay. Or Coffee Smug says maybe turn off the camera. Is that?
Yeah, not a bad idea. I'll do that for now.
And then see if we can get it back. I like that picture. That's nice. That's you and your wife? I think I got. We'll wait to hear Kevin. So the bottom line on my position is I believe that if, and this is, I believe, what William Lane Craig has said. He said, if objective morals and values exist, God exists. And he says objective moral values and duties do exist, therefore God exists. And so it's a nice little syllogism that he has come up with. And so I think that seems to make sense for me. I guess Kevin would push back on saying whether or not these objective moral values and duties exist. And so the question is, do we have a conscience that tells us we should do what's right? Do we have a conscience to even know what's right and what's wrong? And so I see Kevin coming in on this one. There we go. Do you want me to take this one out?
I'm gonna hope.
Oh, okay.
If you actually put the other one back in SJ, what I can do is I can mute the one mic and yeah, hold on.
Audio, and you should be getting
good.
my actual, yeah. So let me know if this works for you, because this is working for me all right.
Yeah, this is a good idea. Then we can see you still. Perfect. And we can hear the better voice, because your voice sounds better in the computer.
Good. Okay. So where we actually, let me just ask you, because it took me a minute. Sorry about that. Where were you heading after I had my connection problems?
So I think I was trying to come up with, oops, wait. Oh, there we are. You're back. So I was trying to come up with points of agreement and points of disagreement. So basically the bottom line on my position and on the Christian position, and I do believe it's also the Catholic position, is just saying that we have these objective moral values and duties to do what's right. And you ask to yourself, what is right? Well, to love, to be faithful, for one, to be just, to be fair, to be honest. So we have these objective moral values and duties. And supremely, I can see also is the idea of they're not always equal. Sometimes you might have to sacrifice a little bit of one duty possibly to help another duty. So for example, if you were, and a lot of people bring up this example of the Nazis, and they say, well, what if you were hiding a bunch of Jewish people in your house and the Nazis came by and they asked you if you were hiding anybody in your house, would you lie to them? And then the person a lot of times would say, you lie, therefore you can say there's a situation in which this is contingent, and you're not always going to tell the truth. Sometimes it's better to tell a lie. And so that's what they'll say. But what I would say to answer that, because I think that's actually a pretty good argument, and I struggled with that for a little while, is I would say that these objective moral values and duties do not have exactly the same values. So I think sometimes the value to love and to treat another human in a correct way is paramount and more important than, say, necessarily the value to tell the truth if telling the truth is going to hurt that human, and the love that, and break the love. If they go to kill that person, you won't have that person around anymore, so you would lose the person, they'd lose their life. And so I'd say that values are can be I'd say that values are not of the exact same value. What do you think of that?
So I mean, I certainly agree in the sense that I would lie to the Nazi. I would lie to the Nazi in a heartbeat, and I wouldn't feel bad about it. Now, with regard to things having like different value, so that's a little difficult for me to talk about as a nominalist, just because my concept of value is just that I think that value is like whatever humans decide like value is. Like different people value different things. And so one person might decide that he values not lying more than he values the life of the Jew in the basement. So he will not lie to the Nazi. Okay. I disagree strongly.
I totally disagree. Yeah, I'm lying.
I don't know that I can like make a
case.
factual argument that says like, well, one is better than the other. What I can do is make a conditional argument. So if you value the life of somebody more than you value your ability not to lie, then you should lie. If you value your non-lyingness more than the life of the person that you're hiding in your basement, then you should not lie. But notice that those are both conditional statements. Neither of those are objective statements.
So do you believe that humans have a moral duty to love other humans?
No, I'm a moral anti-realist. So I prefer everybody.
Sorry, was I?
I'm getting like muted mic messages. I'm confusing myself. Sorry about that. I don't think that anybody has a moral I don't think that anybody is morally obligated to do anything. But what I can say is that I don't want to live in a society where people don't love each other. And so I choose to surround myself with people who love each other because I prefer it that way. But that is a much softer than the claim that we...
Oh, wait. Did you finish your... I didn't hear.
Can you not hear me at all?
I couldn't hear you. I heard you, but then I didn't see you moving your mouth, so I think you would stop talking, but I wanted to make sure I heard. So you and I disagree right on the basic premise, because I've talked to atheists or agnostics before, and I know you're agnostic. You haven't really made a claim to atheism at all or anything like that. But I've talked to people before who say we do have objective moral values and duties, and they say, but we don't need God for that. And so I would say that God is the source of that. And some people who argue that we have that, but we don't need God, are people who argue for this consequentialism and saying that we have a desired outcome to maximize pleasure and happiness. Therefore, the outcome is also the source. That's the argument that is kind of circular that I've heard against it. But you're taking the moral. Would you call yourself a moral relativist?
No, I'd call myself an anti-realist. And I understand that the audio is probably considerably worse now than it was a minute ago, but
no, it's not bad.
Okay, good. So the reason I wouldn't call myself a relativist is because I don't think that's actually like a word that's like really used in the literature. So I'm not entirely sure what that even means, to be honest. But some conception might be something to the effect of like there are objectively right and wrong things, but what's objectively right and wrong in one instance might be different in a different instance. And I just don't think that things are actually objectively right or wrong. I only think that things are subjectively right.
Interesting. So is it, let me ask you this. So one of the things that distinguishes it, relativism, just to say what that is, relativism says that your cultural values are relative or determined by the culture in which you're immersed. So if you're in Italy and accepting bribes or giving money to the mafia is acceptable in Italy, then it's morally appropriate or morally correct to accept bribes in Italy, or accept money from, or pay money to the Nazi, or I'm sorry, the mafia in Italy. Or if you were in Germany in the 1940s and Germans had said that the German race was superior, it was morally correct for you to value yourself above other humans because they said that the Aryan race was superior, and they labeled themselves as this Aryan race. And so I see faults in relativism itself, but I don't think you say you're not that. So I'm curious to see. So what exactly do you, because the idea of objective moral values and duties says that another way to say that is not mind independent moral values and duties or subjective. It's saying that it's stance independent, meaning that we have these moral values and duties. It doesn't matter what your opinion is of the moral values and duties, or whether or not you can act out the moral values and duties. They're stance independent. They stand regardless of us. And the reason I can say that is because they go across populations and across people groups and across generations. And so I have a duty to tell the truth, and I have a duty to love other humans. In fact, I'll just go to the ones Jesus said: love your neighbors as you love yourselves, love God above all else. So we have this moral duty to love. Now, people in Jesus' generation had that duty to love. People in our generation have that duty to love. Whether or not somebody wants to love, or whether or not how somebody feels about that, doesn't matter. That duty stands irregardless of what anyone's opinions of it are, or whether or not anyone can act on it correctly.
So this prompts me to ask a question. So I would assume that you would call yourself like a non-subjectivist about morality. Is that right?
I wouldn't go that far, because I definitely think there is some subjective acceptance of morality, and you have to have some level of because you're the subject. You're basically going to have you're going to experience morality yourself, and you're going to try to figure out through your conscience what's right and what's wrong. So I would say that. So I don't want to say I'm a non-subjectivist, but I would say that I'm definitely somebody who believes we have stance independent moral values and duties, regardless of like moral values to love. It happened in the 1500s. It happened in the thousands. It happened at year one. So we've always had this moral value to treat other humans with dignity and with love.
Can these stance independent moral facts change over time?
Can they change over time? No, I think the stance independent moral facts, just like when Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So Jesus is truth. And so the idea that the truth changes is not working. So we're constantly seeking the truth, and we're seeking to make ourselves align with the virtues that God has deemed appropriate for us. But I think humans are constantly in that process. But I don't think the truth itself doesn't change. Just like you agree that truth doesn't change.
So I do agree that truth does not change. I just don't think that there are moral truths. But so this leads me to a question. How do you take things like polygamy? Polygamy was clearly endorsed by God in the Old Testament, but is pretty clearly considered to be wrong by like modern Christians. So do you think it was wrong for those people to be polygamous in the Old Testament era? Or maybe it was right for them to do it, and it would be fine for us to do it. Or maybe morality did change, and like it was stance independently moral to be polygamous back then, but it is stance independently immoral today to be. You know what I mean? Like one of those. I think one of those has to be the case. I don't think I left anything out. What do you think about that?
I think it's hard for us to really understand what was going on in the Old Testament in the context of everything, and because we don't live in that world. And so one of the reasons why I think the idea that people would have multiple wives or something like that, or multiple husbands, that kind of actually wouldn't have multiple husbands. I guess it was always multiple wives, wasn't it? It was never
Yeah.
multiple husbands. But
Yes.
but it was the one of the reasons we would see that is if men go off to war, and say a guy has 5 brothers and he goes off to war, he gets killed, and he had a wife, the wife would go to one of his brothers, and then say that brother gets killed, and then the wife would go to another brother, and the brothers might already have other wives, and so suddenly one brother might have 3 wives because they took on. And so there were some strange situations going on back then that I think it's hard for us to understand because we're sitting here with our modern lenses looking at it. And so and
So
Kyrie
I'm not.
Eliason,
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not sure if I got a full answer on that one. So, do you think it was morally
just taking my
permissible?
sweatshirt off because it's hold on, there's 1 second.
Don't blame you. Don't blame you. I'll ask the question while you get adjusted. Do you
It's
think it
hot
was stance? Do you think it was stance independently permissible, morally permissible, to be polygamous 3,000 years ago?
It's not that I say it's being polygamous, it's the idea of love. And I don't think that, I think that the idea 2,000 years ago was that Jesus told us it's to be between one man and one woman. And so, and he said that's how it was always intended. He went back to Adam and Eve in
So
the
maybe
Old Testament. And so
maybe Abraham was wrong to have a child with his slave wife.
Oh, Abraham was definitely wrong to do that.
Interesting. Okay.
Abraham didn't trust God enough to know that he could have a child through his wife Sarah. That was where he went wrong. And so that was
right,
and that ended up being, unfortunately, that's Ishmael. That's the whole start of the group that ended up going Muslim. It's like so.
But do you think that every single person who wound up having multiple wives in the Old Testament was wrong to do so? Like it was wrong for them to do that?
Well, in the cases that I just mentioned, where you'd marry the brother,
I'm not talking about those cases.
So I think it was wrong for Solomon to have as many wives as he had. Absolutely. I don't think that was correct.
I'm not talking about Solomon specifically. I'm talking about just in general. Do you think that polygamy was wrong back then?
I think polygamy was wrong.
Okay, so polygamy, and this is very consistent of you. So polygamy was wrong. It was wrong in Genesis and Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, just like it was wrong in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Right? That's your stance.
Yeah, I think polygamy was wrong. I think
cool.
humans, like I think Jesus sort of explained that. He said it wasn't how it always was meant to be. Just like when they asked Jesus about divorce, and he said that's not how it was meant to be. Moses eased up on some of the rules for them because of the way that they were in their hardened hearts. And so I think that's kind of the similar idea.
Cool. I mean, you're not going to hear any pushback from me if you just kind of want to be like, yeah, I think that all of the examples of polygamy in the Old Testament are immoral. Cool.
Yeah. Well, again, if we're not counting on those cases, like I mentioned, with marrying the brother, with that kind of thing.
No, I'm just talking about whenever anybody has more than one wife. You think that's immoral across the board, stance independently immoral. Because I'm cool with that. Like, I'm really not going to push back.
Yeah.
I'll just say like, oh wow, that's very.
I think polygamy, and I'm actually saddened to hear that polygamy does exist in so many societies still today. I think you and I can both agree that I mean, I would hate to have multiple wives in this house. It would be so ridiculous. I mean, imagine having a whole, my husband would hate it, all the henpecking in the house. He'd be like, get these women out of here. It's just like all the honey-do lists that would be up on the refrigerator.
Well, I happen to think that, so I don't think this is necessarily true across the board, but what I'll say for me is that I'm married to exactly as many wives as I want to be married to.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Which is one.
Yeah.
My one wife that's all I have, all the wives that I want, which is one. So that's where I'll leave that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I don't know how I look at these situations like in Utah. I've seen this TV show where there's all these wives and this one guy, and I think, what in the world is that?
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking another question,
sure.
You briefly brought up the Euthyphro dilemma earlier, and I think that you were essentially saying that you're not super concerned with the Euthyphro dilemma.
I think it's a false dichotomy.
Okay, and maybe tell me why.
Because God is the objective. They don't give you the third standard, the third idea. So they say, if God commands somebody to do something, is it good because God commands it? Or is it because God commands it that something is good? And the idea is God is the source of goodness himself. God is the standard of morality. And so they didn't give us that third choice. So that's why I think that Socrates could have used a thought on that too. But he, of course, didn't have the example of Jesus and didn't have that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I have a question for you. Is God the source of goodness?
Yes.
Or is God goodness?
God is goodness and the source of goodness. So he's both.
Okay. So like, is God inside of certain things when things are good?
I can't say you'd have to, like, for example, let me just think about how I would look at that. So if I look to the Bible and I consider all of the passages that were predicting Jesus to come, and how throughout the book of Isaiah it speaks of the idea of the light, and how Jesus is the light. He's the truth. He's truth and light and all of the kind of good things. And so I think that Jesus's influence on this world leads to each of us having a little bit of light within us. I think we all have this light within us. And I think that it's also a source of warmth and goodness. And it's interesting because if you look into the sky, I think one of the reasons why we have the sun in the sky in the way that God created this way, I'll get to where believe me, I'm going to get to where you're going. So here's what it is. Okay. So we have the sun in the sky. We can't directly look at the sun, but we can feel the warmth of the sun and we can see all that the sun produces, all of the light in the world. And I think that's a very good way to understand what God is to us. We can't directly look at God. We can't see God the Father, but we can feel God and we can see the effects of God all throughout the world. And if I also go to look at just people in general, I think each person has that little sparkle of light inside of them while they're in this world. But here's the big but. I have encountered one time a very dark spirit that had zero light. It was the scariest encounter I ever had.
And that was me.
What's that? It wasn't you.
I said that was me. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, I'm just telling you that was the one. That's why I understand that I can see that everyone has this little spark of light. But if you should choose to walk away from God, and in the end, that's going to be very dire consequences, and it's permanent fixed consequences, and no light will remain. And so the one encounter I had with a very dark spirit, there was no light. All I could feel was pure, cold evil. And so I'm just trying to say that this source of this light, this beauty, love, all of that kind of stuff comes from God, comes from Jesus, and you don't want to lose it. You don't want to. And I just see you as a really nice guy. And I see you maybe on a temporary path right now, because right next to the path, the lost sheep passage that I opened my Bible up to was the prodigal son passage. So maybe just kind of going away, thinking, hanging out, partying and stuff like that. I don't know what it is, but then maybe coming back, maybe in your 30s, your 40s, and one day you wake up and say, "Oh yeah," because I was kind of like all over the place up till I was early 40s. So you can kind of, I was thinking Eastern faiths had some great ideas, and I was just searching for the truth, just like I think you're searching for the truth. And some people might say, "Oh, SJ doesn't know, she should have found this particular religion or that particular religion." But I can say I've spent my life looking for it. And I think once you do feel like you've found the truth sets you free.
Yeah. I'm totally cool with anybody thinking about me like the prodigal son if they want to.
I don't think you're doing anything wrong though, like the prodigal son. Put it that way. You're not out spending.
Yeah,
no, it's not like that.
That's what I wanted to say. I don't think about myself quite in that way. And the reason I don't is because when I think of the prodigal son, I think of somebody who just doesn't care. Like the prodigal son is out there partying, spending his dad's money, doesn't want to return to dad's land, doesn't really care. He just wants to have a good time. And then eventually he's like, "Oh man, maybe I guess I ought to return home to my dad's property." I'm not quite doing that in the sense that I care an awful lot. I just think what I used to think was wrong. Like I'm convinced that different things are true. And I don't think that is quite analogous to the prodigal son. But again, if somebody wants to make like if all that they mean is that like the prodigal son used to be on his dad's property, he left his dad's property, now he's back on his dad's property, and you think that I used to be Catholic, then I left Catholicism, then I'm going to come back to Catholicism. Like cool. Like you can, I'm not offended when you call me the prodigal son or anything.
Oh, okay, wait.
I just don't.
Let me fix that. I've been thinking now. I have to fix that. I don't think that you're. I think you've done all the right things. I think you've done the right things, getting married to your wife and going through life. And I think you're a very nice guy, and I can see that play out. And I've watched a lot of your videos, and so I can say you've got tons of great qualities. So I think the reason why that passage, I opened the book to that passage, but also to the lost sheep, is the combination of the two, just showing you that when the person who left comes back, how happy God is, how happy the Father is, and how he throws the big party and gets really excited. And on the lost sheep, just this idea of God doesn't let you go. He doesn't. He will search out. If he has to leave 99 other sheep to go find that one, he's going to do it, and he's going to take every step.
Yeah. And this doesn't have as much to do with moral realism or anything, but just quick side tangent is that what you're talking about right here is exactly why I sleep fine at night. I firmly believe that if there is a God who cares about me, and if I am honestly searching for truth, that he would show me the truth eventually. Like I fervently do believe that. And then if I die and I'm still not Catholic, then that says to me either I guess maybe Catholicism is false, or maybe like there is a God and he just doesn't care if I believe in him or not, which seems implausible to me. Or I secretly wasn't actually being open-minded, like I thought I was, but I wasn't. And if that's the case, like, man, I'm doing the best that I can, and that's all I can do. And so in that sense, I'm leaving it all on the field. Like I am searching as hard as I possibly can, and I'm being as open-minded as I possibly can, and that's all I can do. And if I go to hell over that, it's kind of like, well, not for lack of trying. You know what I mean? So I'm leaving it all on the field, and that lets me sleep okay.
That's fair. Yeah. I think I firmly believe in that. And I think that's why I opened it up to the lost sheep passage. And so
Yeah.
I do believe that. I don't think that God's not going to let his children just like you wouldn't let, if you had children, you're not going to let your children just run away. I'm going to go chase after them.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, you might like, I guess the idea was with the prodigal son, he lets him run away. He lets you run away, but it's not that he won't accept you if you come back. But I don't know. It's two parables it's interesting that they're right back to back where I opened up that page. And so
yeah.
That was.
I see the question from Harry.
I wanted to see if you want to answer that.
Yeah. So I don't think that all religions have identical probabilities. In order for every religion to have identical probabilities, it seems like their claims would have to be so similar that like the probabilities are just identical to each other. And that just like doesn't appear to be the case, particularly because we can compare religions that are kind of just more specific than other religions. Like I think that the Mere Christianity of C.S. Lewis has a much higher probability of being right than Catholicism, in the sense that there is no possible world where Catholicism is right but Mere Christianity is wrong. And there are tons of worlds where Catholicism is false but Mere Christianity is still right. So in that sense, Christianity is just far broader than Catholicism. So like the Catholicism and Christianity example seems to me to indicate that no, not all religions have the same probabilities of being correct, because like non-Catholic Christianities are almost like by default correct if Catholicism is also correct, at least some of them. Like the ones that straight up deny transubstantiation are of course false, but there are Protestant religions that do not deny transubstantiation. So like those would be correct alongside Catholicism if Catholicism is true, because the other religions just don't make as specific claims. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I see. I see what your point is, because Catholics definitely have some very specific beliefs. Catholics are pretty unique in a few different beliefs. One is, like you mentioned, transubstantiation, where we do believe that it's the literal body and blood of Jesus Christ. That's one. And then there was the next one is the reverence for Mother Mary. I think that's somewhat unique to Catholics and Greek Orthodox Church. I think you see more of that in the East and those kind of places. And
Mhm.
I think if you were to pick another, like, I noticed that you didn't talk about Hindus or Buddhism. Have you looked into any of those faiths?
Nope, not at all. I have like a little bit of a thing that I talk about when I talk about these religions. You could spend your entire life researching just like Roman Catholicism, like not even like Eastern Catholicism, just like Roman. Like you could spend every second of every waking hour researching Roman Catholicism and not have learned everything that there is to learn about Catholicism. There is just
Oh, I
so
know.
much out there. So
I agree.
what is somebody to do? If you're born with no religion and you want to research all of them, like, hey, every single week I'm going to trade which religion I'm looking into. So this is a Hinduism week, and then next week is a Catholicism week. Good for you, I guess. I'm not going to do that. Why? Because suck it up. This is what I've chosen to do. You're going to have to deal with it. And that's a little bit of a joke, but I was born Catholic, like very Catholic. And so Catholicism is my pet project. I am going to be looking into Catholicism for essentially the rest of my life. And that doesn't leave me enough time to look into like Hinduism or Buddhism. I was born in the northeastern United States where the majority religion is Catholicism. I know I'm not being fair to Hinduism. I'm not being fair to Buddhism. I'm not being fair to Islam. Sorry, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Islam. You're going to have to deal with it. That's kind of my 2 cents. There's not enough time. If Hinduism is right, though, and I do get reincarnated as a human again in my next life, I promise I will dedicate that life to Hinduism.
Then you might get reincarnated into a cow in the life after that.
If I do get reincarnated as a cow, I don't think I'm looking into any religions at all. So that solves that problem.
So I wanted to say, because I see that Captain Kim, Intuition Demon, is saying, and actually Slam RN, what is it about Hebrews? I know that I think the passage that you just cited, I know that passage is it from Hebrews talking about taste it. Would you say, Kevin, is that what Susan is saying right here? She's making a point about this one verse, and I'm forgetting what exactly I was thinking the verse was in Timothy, but maybe it is. It says, "For it is impossible to those who were once enlightened and have tasted the heavenly gift, were made partakers of the Holy Ghost, and have tasted the good work of God and the powers of the world to come, if they should fall away, to renew them again unto repentance." And then it goes on to say that it'd be like crucifying Jesus again. And so the question is that I think is, does God, and this is a big argument for Protestants and Catholics and Christians of all stripes, because people have different views on how that verse is to be read. Some people would say that God doesn't enlighten those. I mean, you only get enlightened once and you just don't leave. And if you're the Calvinist, you say it's not even your choice. God's selecting certain people and enlightening them and choosing them and not choosing other people. And there's nothing you can do. And so there's all these different belief systems. So what do you think?
So I grew up Catholic, right? So I'm not a Calvinist in that way. I never was a Calvinist in that way, so it's difficult for me to say too much about like the idea of like there being an elect or anything like that. It's also not part of the Catholic tradition, that like once saved always saved kind of mentality. Like that's not part of the Catholic tradition, so I never believed that. If you want to believe that, like knock yourself out, I guess. It seems entirely unfalsifiable to me. Like I have no way of validating, like how do you know who's saved and who's not saved? You don't know that. Only God and then the other people in heaven know who's saved and who's not saved.
That's true.
So while you're on earth, you have no way of falsifying the claim, once saved, always saved. So I'm kind of not going to worry about it. That's my 2 cents. And sorry if that's like a little like
it is hard to know,
dismissive or something. It's just, yeah, I can't know, and so I kind of don't care.
So were you, also I want to ask you, since you said you're raised in the Catholic faith, were you confirmed in the Catholic faith too? You went through the whole confirmation process?
Oh, yeah. My confirmation name is John Vianney. So my full name, and my real last name is not non-Tradicatus O'Connor. So my full last name is Kevin James John Vianney O'Connor the fourth. I add the fourth. I'm not really the fourth, but yeah, I'm Kevin James John Vianney O'Connor. That is my full name.
So who's John Vianney? I don't know. Is he a saint? Obviously.
Yes, he's the patron saint of priests, because I thought that I wanted to be a priest when I was getting confirmed.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was Catholic. Like I went to mass 6 days a week, Catholic, confession once a week. Yeah, I was an altar boy. I served at a traditional high mass. Like I was the highest ranked altar boy that I could be. I was the real deal.
So
It was a
what
big part of
happened?
my life.
I mean, what one thing that could have happened is you met your wife, and that is not going to work if you're going to be a priest. But
She was Catholic.
is she still?
About being a priest. Sorry.
Yeah,
I
without
thought
being. No, because I
Yeah.
mean that would be one reason. But I listened to this video. This is really interesting because I'm going to have him on my channel on Saturday. But I listened to, and he's been on your channel, Swan Sana, and in fact, it was
I
because
love
of
Swan.
you
Yeah.
that I got connected to him. But I was listening to one of his videos, and he wanted to discern whether or not he should go into the priesthood. And actually, he spent, I can't remember, it was 2 years, I think it was, with a bunch of priests, figuring out if it was the right role for him and if that's where God was calling him. And he decided
My brother did that.
he did. Yeah, well, Swan decided it wasn't right for him for some reasons, and
Yep.
and so I'm just wondering, how did you decide that you weren't going to pursue that?
How do you decide anything, right? Like, how do you know what you believe? It's such a hard question to answer. So I was confirmed relatively young compared to a lot of other Catholics. I was confirmed when I was like 12. A lot of Catholics don't get confirmed until they're like 15 or something. But in the traditionalist society, it's normal to get confirmed when you're like 11 and 12 and stuff. And I knew I didn't want to be a priest anymore by the time that I was like 15, 16, because that's when I like figured out like, no, I really like girls. And I know that comes as a surprise. Like a lot of people think I'm gay. I'm not. Like no,
you're married.
And I'm not offended at all. I'm not offended at all that people think that I am. Like I don't think it's an insult in the slightest. I have a speech impediment and I'm like very bubbly, so I think I just come across as a little gay sometimes, which again, I'm totally fine with. I don't care in the slightest. But I knew that I really liked girls when I was like 14, and I was like, yeah, this is God calling me to the married vocation. So this was like, I was still very Catholic when I was 14, but I knew that I really liked girls. And so I took that as a sign that God was telling me, don't go to the priesthood, get married, have a ton of Catholic babies, and take you and your wife and your 10 kids to mass every Sunday in a giant van, because that's what tradies do. So that's by the time that I was like 14, I was like, yeah, no, I'm not supposed to be a priest. God's telling me that you like girls. So
in a giant van, you reminded me of, I have this one neighbor who lives down the street, and they have this giant van. It's this gigantic white van.
How many kids do they have? Like a ton?
I think it's a bunch of foster kids, because the kids
all that's beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's really beautiful, but there's a whole bunch of them, and they're all different, flavors. That's awesome. It's amazing.
My wife and I don't have any kids yet. We're young. We're in our late 20s. But we talk about adopting. We say that like if we ever gonna have kids, they will be adopted. That's how it's.
Oh, that's so nice.
So yeah.
One of my coworkers.
We're not committing to it yet. We're young.
Yeah.
Give us time.
Yeah, you've got time.
Yeah.
That's one of my coworkers adopted a little foster child and has been raising him now for, I think it's been about 5 years ago. Everything's been wonderful for them. I mean, she's just gave him another chance. Little boy who kind of had it rough in the first couple of years of his life, and she got another chance.
So I live in the state of Kentucky, and in the state of Kentucky alone, there's like tens of thousands of kids in the foster care system, like tens of thousands in Kentucky, not California, not New York.
Wow. Yeah.
Kentucky. Like,
how big is Kentucky population wise? It's a pretty big state.
No, it's like 2 million people in the
really?
entire
That's
state.
it?
Tiny.
Wow.
So there are maybe I'm short selling it by like a little bit, but the largest city is Louisville. Louisville has like less than 700,000 in it. I think it's like 650,000. I live in the second largest city in the state, Lexington, where University of Kentucky is. Lexington is like 350,000 people. And then the rest of the state combined is maybe another million people. Wow. So more people live. So I grew up in New Jersey, and New Jersey is like 1/10 of the size of Kentucky, but has like 3 or 4 times the population, I think. So like I went from living in like the densest state in the nation to not the least dense, but one of the least dense. So yeah, I much prefer it down here. I like Kentucky.
Yeah. As you know, I'm in Florida, and we have 21 million people. And I'm always like, wow, we have 4 times the population of both Norway and Ireland, twice the population of Sweden.
Wow.
I mean, it's like, There's
Yeah,
so many people here.
I know. At least Florida's a big state though, because like New York City is like 8 million people
Oh,
in New
squeezed in.
York City, just New
Yeah.
York City. So there's like 4 times as many people living in New York City alone than in like in all of Kentucky. Like, yeah, the population of New York City is 4 times that of the population of the state of Kentucky. So
Wow.
yeah, demographic. There's your trivia for the day.
So yeah, and I agree, Susan. The lockdowns created thousands more in the foster care system and orphans. Yeah, it's so
That's
terrible.
sad.
Yeah, and
And,
COVID
and yeah, and Harry said, "Does Kevin stutter?" I don't stutter. I have like a little bit of like a lisp. Like if you listen to my S's, they're like a little bit funny. And so
I
some
can't
people
even
think
hear
that
that. I don't even.
success. I'm a good actor. But like it's slight, but it's there.
Yeah.
And it gets worse when I drink. But but so, and I'm also just like a bubbly person in general. And I'm not offended in the slightest. Because I just lack the moral intuition that there's anything wrong with being gay. Full circle, bring it all back. But I
So
don't
I
think there's
don't.
anything wrong.
You know, it's
So I'm not offended
interesting
when people
because
think I am.
I think that there's some people who have inclinations to be gay, definitely, and I think some people are born with those inclinations. They have that idea because a lot of times you'll see that if you have gay people in the family, it tends to be more gay people, more gay it's more likely if you have a lot of gay family members that maybe you'd be gay too, even in relatives and that kind of thing.
I
So
think that
see
there's a genetic component to it.
there's a little, but the thing is I don't think, see, God doesn't say that being gay itself, that's the issue is the gay act. That's what God
Right.
is against. It's not so much you're
Right.
born, you've got attraction to the same
Mhm.
sex. That's not the issue. The issue is acting on it.
Right.
Do you think
right.
do you think it was right of Paul to say that in the book of Romans, that you're not supposed to engage in that kind of those kind of activities?
No, I don't think Paul was right when he said that.
So
That's probably not surprising though, right? Because
No,
like
I
I don't think that. Yeah, I think Paul
I'm
was
just-
wrong about a bunch of things.
So yeah, no, Kevin is not gay. Kevin's married. So no, he's not.
I am to a woman and everything.
Yeah.
Here's there's
See in that
there's
one
the ring.
picture
Oh, no, hold on.
I can see it.
There we
Yeah.
go.
There you go.
Yeah, and if I'm going to turn off my camera, and you could see a picture of my wife. I think.
Oh,
Maybe not.
Not on the cell phone. It's
Oh, that's weird. Well, rewind. Don't actually do this, but go ahead and rewind, and you'll see a picture of my wife.
yeah.
If you're
No.
really bored, you have nothing else to do.
No, it's interesting. So what else should we talk about? I know we're coming up on an hour. We could probably go.
If you have a little bit more time, I wouldn't mind telling you why I'm a anti-realist, and then maybe if you want to like push back on that, be like, well, hey, hold on, that doesn't make any sense, Kevin. You know, stuff like that.
Yeah, tell me why. I'm curious.
Yeah. So
actually, first, if you could define it. So define how you what it is to you, because
to me, the moral realist is the person who says that there are facts about the matter when it comes to morality. The moral anti-realist is the person who says that there are no facts matter when it comes to morality. So what does that mean? Well, it's kind of uncomfortable for the moral anti-realist, right? Because the moral anti-realist has to say it's not per se immoral to, and then go ahead and literally insert anything, because nothing is per se immoral because there are no facts of the matter. So torturing babies for fun is not immoral if you're a moral anti-realist. Why? Because, well, morality doesn't actually exist, so it can't be immoral. Well, that's pretty uncomfortable. Why would anyone want to hold that position? And why do I hold that position? Well, because I think it's true. I actually hold a whole bunch of positions that I think are super uncomfortable, but I am more committed to truth than I am to comfort. So I believe those things which I think are true. Why do I think moral anti-realism is true? It's actually, and I mentioned William of Ockham earlier. So William of Ockham himself was not a moral anti-realist. William of Ockham was a divine command theorist. But William of Ockham is famous for Occam's razor and Occam's razor. What is Occam's razor? Occam's razor is essentially just don't multiply things into your ontology if you don't need them. So let's say that I drop this pen and the pen falls when I drop it. Okay, why did the pen fall? Well, we can say that it's gravity. Great. We could also say that some invisible beings actually grabbed the pen at the moment that I dropped it, and they guided it down by flapping their little wings and bringing it down. Both of those would explain why the pen fell. But which one should we choose to believe? Well, probably the more parsimonious one. What is parsimony? Parsimony is just simplicity. Which one is it going to cost me less to believe in? And it's going to cost me less to believe that gravity did it than it did that some, like, invisible beings with wings grabbed it and brought it down. So what does any of this have to do with morality? Well, I can explain the universe without positing morality. I don't need morality to explain, for instance, the motion of, the planet Earth as it goes around the sun. I can do that with math and without morality, so I don't need to. So let's not posit, and I think SJ would agree with me there. There's nothing moral or immoral about the movement of one celestial body around the other. However, where we're going to disagree is like the acts of humans. So like when somebody tortures a baby for fun. The reason I'm not going to say that it's wrong to do that, like immoral, is because I don't need morality to explain anything that's happening. When we say, why is that man torturing that baby for fun? I can explain all of it without positing morality. I can say things like, well, the man is sawing the baby in half for fun because he has a saw in his hand and he's making a back and forth motion. Well, why is he making that back and forth motion? Well, the muscles in his arms are contracting back and forth. Why are the muscles contracting? Well, the neurons in his brain are actually sending electrical signals to the muscles in his arm to make it go back and forth. Well, why are the neurons firing? Well, those neurons fired because he saw a stimulus with his eyes. What caused that stimulus to hit his eye? Well, it's actually photons bouncing off of the thing that was stimulating his eye. Well, how'd those photons get there? Well, those photons actually came from a star way out, so on and so forth. I don't need to say, well, the reason he's doing it is because he's immoral. That kind of just doesn't come into the equation whatsoever for the moral anti-realist. So the moral anti-realist is kind of stuck saying, I don't actually think that we need any kind of morality in order to explain anything that's going on. But the moral anti-realist might still desire to kind of hold on to some sense of morality. And so I'm sympathetic to people who do this. The prime example is Sam Harris, right? So Sam Harris talks all about human well-being, and Sam Harris calls himself a moral realist, and he thinks that morality is all about human well-being. I care about human well-being. I won't torture babies for fun because it is bad for the well-being of that baby to torture it for fun. So therefore, I'm opposed to it. But notice that morality did not come into the conversation here. The only thing that came into the conversation is the fact that I care about human well-being. If you want to make the argument that morality is all about human well-being, then, and you want to call me a moral realist because of it, fine. But I think that we're playing semantic games. Why? Because not everyone agrees that morality is all about human well-being. A very common example is the vegans, right? The vegans don't think that it's all about human well-being. The vegans want to include animals in the whole well-being thing. But then there's also the religious types who, some of the religious types will actually tell you that it is all about human well-being, but some of the religious types will say, no, it actually has nothing to do with human well-being, and it has all to do with like something like the honor and glory of God. So if God wanted you to go to hell, like, you deserve hell. And so it would be perfectly just of God to let you go to hell. Yes, that's bad for your well-being, but no, it would not be immoral of God to do that. Why? Because morality has nothing to do with human well-being. Morality has everything to do with like the honor and the glory of God, or something like that. So I'm just not convinced that morality really is all about human well-being, but I do admit that I care a great deal about human well-being, and that's why I oppose torturing babies for fun. That was very verbose. And so I guess SJ, go ahead, like pick that apart and like, tell me where you think I'm like way off base or something.
Well, I'll go back to Sam Harris because, yes, Sam Harris does believe that we have objective moral values and duties to do what's right. And he believes that the purpose is that we all collectively get together and we think that we want to maximize human well-being. We want to minimize harm. And so that's his thing.
Mhm.
But what he's doing there is very circular. In his particular case, like you said, he's focusing on an outcome that not everybody agrees with. Some
Yeah.
people have different ways to maximize their own perceptions of, usually not just even well-being, but their own perceptions maybe of pleasure. And one person might want to rape somebody else to maximize his pleasure. So there's lots of examples where people do not agree on all of this kind of stuff, on what would be maximization of pleasure and whether or not the action that somebody performs is maximizing everyone's pleasure or minimizing everyone's harm. But the other thing that Sam Harris does is it's a consequentialist argument. So he's saying that the outcome, the desired outcome, which is a maximization of well-being, is also the source. And so he's circular. He's got a circular argument. For me, we've got a source of morality. And if God wanted to make humans moral, what could he do to show us that certain actions are right and certain actions are wrong? If he wanted to make moral beings, he wants us to do what's right, just, honorable, all that kind of stuff. What would it
really
make
good
sense
thing
for
is-
him to put like a conscience in us to speak to us
Oh.
internally?
Yeah, I actually was gonna say I think it would be super helpful if he like wrote things down, maybe like on a stone tablet, and maybe if he gave us like 10 of them, that would be really helpful. but also, yes, the consciousness thing too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the system that you have, I think at some point you're going to realize that, because we can't live like that. I don't think humanity could survive, and it would have survived at any point in time if we were living in a system where we can't judge another person's actions as either moral or immoral or unlawful. Like we could create these laws around the basic the basic foundational axioms here in the United States, and all humans are of equal value under the eyes of the law. And so that basic axiom and that premise has what set up our legal system.
So I actually kind of disagree a little bit about the premise of our legal system. The premise of our legal system isn't so much of like hey, we're going to make laws about like moral things and immoral things. I think that the law is more about like, let's set up the way that we all want to live subjectively. And I think that like good examples of that can be found in like laws about like let's say like intoxication. Like a lot of people would say like, yeah, no, it's actually immoral to get really drunk, but there shouldn't be laws against it, stuff like that. Morality laws too, like, yeah, Catholics would say that like, people shouldn't live together before they get married, but maybe there shouldn't be laws against it, stuff like that. So I think that like human laws are not quite built on the same moral systems that religions are built on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's someone. I see you see the question. I got Digital Hammurabi has
Yeah.
a question for you. So I don't know, Josh, this Dr. Josh Bowen. I don't know if you know this, but Kevin is an ex-Catholic. So he's an agnostic now, but he's an agnostic who is an anti-moral realist. And so just wanted to clarify in case he just joined us what your position is. And so I don't know if do you want to take that question he has?
What if the laws that endorse practices that we now know to be immoral, like, I'm not sure if I totally understand the question.
I think he's saying, I mean, number one, you're basically making a claim that you wouldn't even judge slavery today, or you wouldn't judge it in the past to be morally right or morally wrong. Is that what you're saying?
I would just call it like opposed to human well-being, and I would have to leave it there. I think that slavery is opposed to human well-being. I think that was true 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. I think that's true today. And I have to kind of leave it there because I'm a moral anti-realist.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard you talk to other people on your channel too about, you kind of fleshed out some of these different views that you have, and so that sort of thing. So is it something that, and the other thing I wanted to ask about, because as far as slavery now, we still have slavery, unfortunately, going on in this world. And so if everyone had would you think it would be a good thing if everyone shared the moral anti-realist position that you have? Do you think that would lead the world in a good place?
I don't know. That's hard to say.
Would it be good? How about just our world leaders? Maybe not everybody in the world, but what if all of our world leaders were moral anti-realists? Like Justin Trudeau, Joe Biden.
Yeah, I don't think things would change very much at all, if I'm being honest, if everyone was a moral anti-realist. Reason being is because I don't think that most people actually have this like robust moral realism that they claim that they do. I think that you asked somebody, Joe Biden, what is morality all about, he would say human well-being. And if he did, then nothing would change if he became a moral anti-realist. Where would things change? In the theocracies. So like in the Middle East, I think things would change. But like in the West, I don't think there'd be a huge difference, if I'm being 100% honest.
Interesting. That's interesting. And I guess we should define what well-being is, because if you define it subjective well-being, like that's a term that we use from the World Value Surveys, they would define that as the combination of happiness and life satisfaction. So you take those two items, put them together, and that's your well-being, your subjective well-being, or your perceptions of your subjective well-being. And so I don't think that that fully captures many aspects of morality. I think there's a lot more to morality. I think that one of the very important functions that's not really captured by that is this idea of sacrifice, and how you'll notice through the centuries how people have sacrificed themselves often for a better cause, or for somebody else, or for their children, or for their parents. People just, meaning not, I don't mean killing yourself, like that type of sacrifice. I'm talking about you make sacrifices. And sometimes the sacrifices that you make don't necessarily maximize your personal well-being. They might,
Right. But notice that the way that I've been kind of couching the term, and Sam Harris does this as well, is human well-being. That's why people are willing to sacrifice themselves for other humans. They do that because they think that human well-being will be maximized if they do so. So yeah, even though their own personal well-being will be decreased or eliminated, the tribe's well-being will increase. I think that's why people sacrifice themselves in these like heroic manners and stuff.
Yeah, well, especially I always look at, and I have to say, we have a lot of military people in my area because I'm near an Air Force base, MacDill Air Force Base. And so there's lots of military people who go to my school and that kind of thing. And I look at the sacrifices that usually it's men, but there's actually several females too that I know pretty well who are also in the military. And so I just think about all the personal sacrifices these people make to go sometimes multiple times into very dangerous parts of the world, and to do that all for the greater good of the United States. Or I could never do that. I just don't have that kind of, I don't think I have that kind of courage. I maybe somehow, I don't know. It's just I'm impressed with those kind of people, I have to say.
I'm impressed with some of them, but I think some of them are just there for a paycheck too. I don't think all of them are across the board heroes. You know what I mean?
Susan. Yeah. I guess I have seen some who are probably there for the paycheck. I definitely can say that.
And for the parties and stuff. I have a lot of military friends.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. I think some of them are there for the parties and the paycheck. Not all, obviously not all. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. It's Susan making little jokes here in the chat. So I want to say hi to people in the chat just to go from that there. We have Harry Stark and Slam RN and Discerner and Digital Hammurabi that I can see right now. So welcome to everybody. I like seeing all of you here. If any of you have a question for Kevin, if you want to put it in the chat, I will ask him. So about because we can dig more into his moral anti-realist position.
Yeah, grill me. And I actually see a question from earlier from Xiami.
Oh yeah, go ahead. I must have missed that one.
So she tagged me and she said, "You're not rejecting God, Jesus Christ, but trying to formulate religions as being under scrutinization. Just trying to understand where you're coming from, and I mean no offense." Good news, no offense taken. I'm relatively hard to offend. I generally tend to interpret questions as coming from like a place of honest inquiry rather than like malice. So please, this goes for everybody, not just you, Xiami, but like ask questions that you think are like weird questions. I lean into the discomfort of the positions that I hold. And I think it's like really important to be able to get uncomfortable with the positions that you hold. Otherwise, you're going to be believing false things that are comfortable rather than true things that are uncomfortable, if that makes sense. But then to go back to your actual question, you said I'm just trying to formulate religions as being under scrutinization. if you and you're saying I'm not rejecting God, yeah. I am not like angry at God or something. Like that's not why I am agnostic. I'm agnostic because I have looked into the arguments for and against God. I haven't been convinced that God exists. However, I also haven't found some kind of knockdown argument that ends with therefore it's impossible for God to exist. So I don't rule it out as being impossible, but I'm also not convinced that it is the case. So I just call myself an agnostic. Some people will be like, well, you're an atheist because of that. And at that point I say, like, that's fine. You can call me an atheist. But if you said, like, are you convinced that God does not exist? I'd say, no, I'm not convinced that God exists.
You
so I
also
call myself
said,
an agnostic. But
yeah, you also said in the last conversation, I said, if Jesus appeared to you, what would you do? Because I've asked a lot of agnostics or atheists that kind of question. And a lot of them say they still wouldn't follow him. They would walk away and all that kind of stuff. But you said, hey, I'd follow him. I'd believe in him if he appeared to me.
oh
So,
yeah.
so you're that's pretty open-minded. And I think that's great.
Yeah. The thing for me too is that, like, I think about Paul on the road to Damascus. Like whatever happened on the road to Damascus, Paul became convinced. And I don't think that it's metaphysically impossible for God. Like, I don't think it's logically impossible for God to give me a similar Damascus Road experience where whatever, I don't know what would happen, but something happens. And then I'm convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt. Like, however it happens. Now I'm convinced. And it's so real to me that I can, like, there's no way that this could be false. That seems totally metaphysically possible to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I would believe if that happened.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
want to
that's
get to this question here with Harry Stark too, because first I want to answer it. I want to tell you something that I've been thinking a lot about the problem of evil. And I think that is probably the most significant problem for atheists. But I've been giving this a lot of thought, and I thought to myself, why is there good and why is there evil? And I thought to myself, there's a couple of theories I've been studying, like social identity theory and self-categorization theory. And a lot of times you form these in-groups versus out-groups. And a lot of times those in-groups and out-groups relationships become very strengthened, your relation to the people in your in-group and your animosity in some cases towards those in an out-group. Social identity theory helps to explain how that happens and how you really develop these strong relationships within your own in-groups to maximize your identity and to maximize your feelings about yourself and that kind of thing. But I was also thinking of one of the reasons why we have evil in the world is because God wants us to view evil as the out group, and also the thought of the problem of apathy. I think the problem of apathy is worse than the problem of evil for God. The idea that people don't even care. They don't look for him. They don't get themselves in the in-group with God or the out-group against God. Instead, there's just this apathetic little crew in the middle. And I think by God having this evil here, he's able to get us into these groups and to develop soldiers for him. And that's what I see. So I was curious, what do you think about have you looked at, I haven't seen Eugene Nagasawa's version of that. Have you?
No, I haven't. I just Googled it right now, and I'm trying to read about it. So I'm going to give you a off-the-cuff response. So not super well researched or anything, but I'm not particularly moved by the problem of evil. Now, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander, to quote William Lane Craig. So I'm not particularly moved by the problem of evil for theists or for atheists. Like, I don't weigh the problem of evil as like a reason why I'm an agnostic. Why? Because I'm a nominalist. So I don't actually think that good and evil exist per se. There are really good theistic nominalists that you can look into. One is Dr. Kenny Boyce. Dr. Kenny Boyce is a Christian. He's a committed Christian. He's not Catholic, but he's Christian. And he's a nominalist. The most famous Christian nominalists are, like I've mentioned several times now, William of Ockham, but then also like Martin Luther himself was pretty nominalistic. So all of these Christian thinkers.
Do you think Martin Luther didn't believe in good and evil?
So I don't know. And Martin Luther seems like he changed his mind all the time. So it's hard to tell for sure what he thought and when he thought it. You know what I mean? But he was at least partially a nominalist, at least. And the nominalist is going to reject anything from their ontology that they don't need to explain the world. Among those is, strictly speaking, good and evil. Now, William of Ockham was a divine command theorist, so he was saying, like, technically there is no good, there is just that which God commands, and there is no evil, there is just that which God forbids. So like they kind of took that and been like, that's their morality. I wouldn't be surprised if Martin Luther had a similar thing, like if that's kind of how he took things. But so to tie this into the problem of evil for atheists, I don't think that evil actually exists. So like I Googled something and I see something by Eugen Nagasawa where they're talking about like the atheist problem of evil depends something on like the like systemic evil, like all the living beings that died before humans came onto the face of the planet. Like I would agree that like animals suffered and stuff like that, and like I would like to avoid suffering where we can. So like if we can kill animals for food without letting them suffer at all, I think that's good, and I think we should. And when I say good, I just mean I think I like that, you know. But this doesn't really move the needle for me one way or the other because I'm a nominalist, and this has nothing to do with theism because there's theists and atheists on the nominalism realism divide. So sorry for the non-answer, but
yeah, no, that's an answer. So so it's interesting. So Kevin, is there anything else we should chat about? Because kind of getting on close to 2:30 in my time, and I don't know if.
Yeah, same. I should probably get back to things. So the only thing that I'll end on is SJ. Thank you so much for having me back. This was another awesome discussion. My door is always open to you, and you were just saying something to the effect of like in groups and out groups and tribalism and stuff. What you and I are doing right now is, and I hope not to be too self-aggrandizing here, but so important. It's really easy for people who don't share religious convictions to kind of only associate people who think the same way as them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really dangerous. I think that's dangerous for yourself because, you know, you might start believing false things because nobody's pushing back on you. And I think it's dangerous for society because if everybody stops talking to their neighbors who don't already agree with them, that's a recipe for, you know, a bad time. And I think that a lot of the like extremism that we're seeing on both sides of the political aisle today are due to the fact that people aren't having conversations like the conversation that we did right now. We just had a conversation where we disagreed the whole time and we were like super friendly to each other. We didn't yell at each other. This was a totally normal, good conversation, and we disagree like a lot.
Yeah. And
I think that these are really important. And so I will just end with a plea to your audience to have these kinds of conversations that SJ and I just had. Talk to people who disagree with you and do it in a friendly manner. And little by little, that's going to make the world a better place.
And I want to go back to in-groups and out-groups just to accentuate that, because I agree with you. We need to have more of these conversations. But the other thing is you and I actually are in the same in-group in a lot of ways. One is we both like this idea of, I mean, one is we like, I mean, I think, how do we put it this way? Even if you don't think that there's an objective moral value, truth and honesty and all that kind of stuff, and justice and fairness and love, you and I both like those dimensions. We're on the same page where we're in the good camp. We like good. and so even though we're not in the same religious camp, we're definitely in the same camp as far as the kind of values I think that both of us value.
Agreed. You and I both care about each other's well-being. I hope that you are happy and healthy and wealthy and wise and all of that good stuff, and you wish the same thing for me. And you would even go further and say that like you hope that I get to heaven one day. At least I hope that you think that.
I do, actually. I do.
Yes.
I'm gonna say some prayers for you too.
Awesome. Thank you. And I say thank you. I say thank you whenever somebody says that they're going to pray for me, and I mean it, because what you're saying when you're saying I'm going to pray for you is like, I'm going to hope that you get to heaven. And that is ultimate human well-being, is heaven. Mm-hmm. So you're saying that you want me to get to heaven is the equivalent of me saying, I hope the best possible stuff happens to you. And like that's only a good thing. So to the agnostics and atheists who get offended at the "I'm going to pray for you," I some people do use it as like like I'm going to pray for you in like a snide way, but most people do not mean it that way. Most people mean it in a "I desire the best for you." And so I'm just always appreciative whenever anybody says that they're going to pray for me.
I decided to say, one of the reasons I decided to say that to you too is because I was listening to Apologia video, and Apologia is an atheist, and he said he wanted people to pray for him. He actually said that. He said he's okay if people pray for him. That's how he put it. I think and he's kind of similar to how you just said it. Like, you're okay if people want to do that.
It's a compliment, not a compliment. It's it's somebody telling me that they want the best for me. That's what it is. So how can you take that any other way besides just, hey, thank you for thinking about me like that?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So what are you working on now? What should people be planning to see? Are you have anything coming up on your channel?
I have a live stream tonight at 7. Oh, I'm a bad YouTuber. I think it's at 7.
If I haven't
Eastern.
put the link, I will put the link in your channel, to your channel in my
I'm going to be honest. I don't think I've even made the link yet. But I'll make it. I'll post it to my channel. This is, so some of your audience might not be interested. This is a live stream where I'm talking to another ex-Catholic. So it's going to be me and another ex-Catholic just talking about the Catholic Church. So I like to do both. I like to talk to people.
You might find some Protestants in there.
That's true. That's true. I might.
They might think, aha, this is a good one.
Ammunition. But then I also
you're in Kentucky. Is that
Eastern?
Eastern. Okay.
Eastern. Yeah. Kentucky is split down the middle into Central and Eastern time, but I'm on the Eastern side. Other than that, I don't think I have anything else on the horizon. So just that live stream tonight. I fly by the seat of my pants. I'm not a very good YouTuber. But if you want to see me fly by the seat of my pants, you can find me at Kevin Non-Tradicath on YouTube. Subscribe for more videos with my random thoughts about moral realism and nominalism and all that stuff. And that's it.
Great. Yeah, well, great. Thank you so much. And so you guys also know I'm going to have Swan Sauna on my channel on Saturday. So be sure to come back Saturday at 1 o'clock and listen to that. That should be pretty fun. And that's that. So whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. So thank you, Kevin. I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast.